In this video, we're going to talk about hot throw and what you can do for your candles to improve your hot throw. So let's first define what it is. So when you've got a candle, a brand new candle, right, and you smell it, the scent that you get when you haven't lit it yet is called the cold throw. So when you've got a candle that's burning in the room, the way that it disperses the fragrance into the room is its hot throw. Now, you also need to, the first thing you need to consider before you start saying, like, oh, my candle has no hot throw, is how big is your room? Okay, so when I lit this candle in my kitchen, which is like a very big living space, I didn't smell anything. Now, I can go and say, oh, my candle has no hot throw, which is completely inaccurate. Actually, what I'm doing is I'm burning the candle in a room that is way too big for its self. Like, I would need 3 or 4 candles to get the scent that I would need in that space. Whereas if I took this to my spare bedroom, which I have a candle in there, and I lit it, it makes the entire room smell absolutely wonderful. So it's not that this candle doesn't have a hot throw, it's that the space that it's in is just outrageously too big. So like, consider first how large is the space that you're burning your candle in, because if you have a really large space, you're going to need more candles to achieve the scent, like to even smell it at all. Here's the first tip when you're actually making your candles that you can do to make sure that the fragrance actually binds with the wax. So the fragrance, when you add it to your wax in your melt pot, right? You got your pot, you got your fragrance and your wax in there, it's melted, and you're ready to add your fragrance in. The first thing that you got to do is you have to test how hot the wax is, right? So do you have one of these, a digital thermometer? You need one if you are actually serious about candle making, because those, manual ones, they're just not good. You know what I'm talking about? One of these where you're supposed to clip them onto the side of your wax container, on the inside like this. You're supposed to clip it on and then it sits in the wax and then it tells you the temperature. That's great if you're like a beginner candle maker, but if you're actually serious about this, you want to get some better equipment. So get a digital thermometer, and what you need to do is when the wax is 185 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 85 degrees Celsius, you need to add the fragrance then. And this will help the fragrance disperse into the wax, and make sure that you're stirring it thoroughly, right? So just a wooden spoon in your bucket, stirring it gently, because if you don't want to slosh too much, because then you'll make bubbles and add air to the wax, which means when you pour it, you're going to have bubbles in it. So you don't want to be too thorough with your stirring. Don't go crazy, just gently stir the wax in for about a minute. Not the wax in, the fragrance into the wax for about a minute, and that will help the fragrance bind to the wax and get a better hot throw for you. Next thing is with your actual fragrance oil itself. Do you have a proper digital scale that you can accurately measure in how much fragrance you have, right? Like this. If you don't, what are you doing? You can't do it by mils. It doesn't work that way. You have to use grams, and you have to use a percentage of the amount of wax that you have in your pot. So if I'm making 1,000 grams of wax in here, what percentage of fragrance oil do I want to add to my wax? If I'm making wax melts, so if I was making wax melts like this, right, I add 10%. So I would add 100 grams of fragrance oil to my 1,000 grams of wax. But are you using a 5%, so you would only add 50 grams? You're not going to have as strong of a scent. So this wax that I used here, this palm pillar wax, this crystal palm pillar wax, I only use 5% in that because it's a different type of wax to soy wax. It only holds a maximum of 7% wax. So you have to kind of pay attention to your wax itself. Usually the manufacturer will tell you what is the percentage of maximum fragrance that wax can hold. If you're trying to achieve a really high scent, like a heat throw, then you're going to want a higher percentage of fragrance oils. So go look at your wax, see what the highest percentage of fragrance oil that wax can hold, and then use the highest percentage. Get a proper scale and properly measure in how much percentage of fragrance that you need for your weight of your wax that you're creating, and use the maximum amount. And again, pouring it into the wax at 185 degrees Fahrenheit, 85 degrees Celsius, using a digital thermometer. Having the proper equipment and doing it the right way makes all the difference. Here's another tip that you probably didn't think about when you were thinking about hot throw, is how large is that melt pool on top of your candle? Is it really small like this one is? Like, so when I'm burning this candle, it's only going to have a really small melt pool, which means that the melted wax is what releases the scent into the air, right? So if you only have a really small diameter, like a taper candle, right, you're not going to get that large scent out of it. Like, scented taper candles are almost pointless because they're burnt usually in a large kitchen. You're not going to be able to smell it. Whereas if you have something with a larger diameter like this, right, in comparison, can you see? This is going to smell more. But even if you have even a larger candle, so like a wider jar, right, and you have multiple wicks in it, that is going to have a tremendously larger melt pool, and it's going to smell even stronger, like in the area that you're burning it, because of just how much melted wax there actually is happening with the candle. To note with that is that you need to do your proper burn test so that when you have the candle actually burning, it's burning properly, so it's not like self-extinguishing with this tiny little flame, right, that's just drowning in this melt pool. We don't want that, and we don't want this huge dangerous flame either. So we need to get the proper ratio of wick to flame to wax to fragrance, right? And if you have a thicker fragrance oil, you're going to need to maybe pour it 5 degrees warmer. Your fragrance oil, pour it in 5 degrees warmer into your wax, so 190 degrees Fahrenheit or 90 degrees Celsius, so that the particles can bind to the wax just a little bit easier. The viscosity of the fragrance oil will be like the wax is hotter, so it will bind better, because like if you have something with like a lot of vanilla in it, it's thick fragrance oil. You know what I mean. If you're a candle maker and you've experienced many different fragrance oils, you know what I'm talking about when it's a thicker fragrance oil. So just pour that one a little bit hotter, and that should be good to go. But you also need to wick test properly so that your candle's burning properly and the burn pool is all uniform and lovely. You're not going to initially smell it. You're going to have to wait 2 hours, for the melt pool. That's what it should be. When you light this, it takes 2 hours to completely melt the entire top of the candle. And then, you should have a good scent. But, again, the room size, let's be realistic. I could show you how large my kitchen is. It's big. It's a lot bigger than most houses. So don't try to smell it in a huge room. Get realistic with it. But I mean, if that's what you're going for and you want to light up this, or I should say smell up this huge room with one candle, then choose a larger candle, multiple wicks, like a larger, container, or even find a really big pillar or something like that. Multiple wicks, high fragrance, oil percentage, and that should work for you. So I hope that helps with your hot throw. If you have any questions, please leave them down below, and watch this video next, and it will help you with your wick testing.